how I'm filming. I have my thoughts here and I'm just setting it on the laundry. There's drapes hanging that kept blowing and I had to hold them down with Patron bottles. What a time for reflection. I think we're all trying to find our ways to cope with everything that's happening in the world and figure out what our role is in it. It's caused me to think a lot about how I've moved through my life and what I'm supposed to be doing with it. Even though I'm kind of nervous about doing this, I feel called to share a little bit more about myself online. And maybe this is something that will resonate with me, or it'll be something I look back at a few years from now and completely cringe at, like how I do majority of my videos whenever I look back at them later. I know that I've found a lot of comfort in people sharing about themselves and speaking about their identities on social media or in podcasts. I hope that I can share some things about myself and it will resonate with somebody who's watching this. Like most people, I am outraged and upset by the way that Black people are treated in America. All of the social unrest has made me take a deep look at myself and the own privileges that I carry. I am biologically half Filipino and half white, and I was raised by two Filipino parents and met my biological father much later in my life. So I mostly identify as Filipino American. Growing up half white, but being surrounded predominantly by my Filipino family made me feel a lot of different things. My white features were pointed out by my family, and I was jokingly called a mutt, made fun of for being bigger, having bigger feet, being taller than everybody else. And at the same time, I was praised for being lighter and that I should go be a model in the Philippines. These comments made me simultaneously internalize some kind of shame and privilege for being white. In my situation, I think because majority of my family is Filipino, I really tried to cling on to my Asian heritage. And I think that longing to be connected to your roots is actually a pretty common feeling for a lot of people of color in America. That definitely always raised the question of, am I ever culturally enough? I think these are things I've always felt, but never necessarily had the language for it until I started taking intercultural communications classes in college, and even right now, because the topic of race is so talked about. I've been loving all the resources that I've been seeing on social media. One of them that I used was the We're Not Really Strangers digital expansion pack, specifically on race and privilege. It asks a lot of great questions about my relationship to my racial identity and where I hold privilege, and just got me thinking about it in a completely different way that I don't think I've ever touched on before. I've learned that I can use my privilege in order to create and hold space for people who aren't granted as much privilege. A specific story that came to mind as I was thinking about this was a time that I was submitted to go audition for a commercial that specifically asked for an Asian woman, which I get casted frequently for. When I got there, you know, you see everybody in the audition room that meets the same criteria as you. I remember feeling kind of awkward because the people that were in the room were fully Eastern Asian women. If that's the person that they were looking for, then I wasn't that, and I was a very whitewashed version of that. I went through with the audition, but I left it thinking, like, I hope they don't pick me, because if they are trying to create something that holds space for Asian representation, then I wouldn't want them to pick just the whitest person who auditioned for it, which is me. I take that story into context of my life because there are so many roles in which people can operate, and those roles, whether that's jobs or representation in organizations or in the media or in neighborhoods, these spaces have always predominantly been taken up by white people. As somebody who is white presenting, I can do my part in making sure that Black voices, that people of color have the space to function in ways that people of privilege have always gotten to do. I've been doing my best to donate to organizations that help Black communities and underserved communities, trying to reflect as deeply as I can about my own identities. I've been trying to follow more Black voices, watch more shows, consume more media by people with Black voices. And I'm doing all these things not so that I'm just doing this because the social movement is going on. I'm doing that so that can feel more like the norm. Black communities, people of color, they're here and they deserve to hold just as much space as the people who have been holding the space for a long time. In doing all of this, I've been reflecting so much about my identity that I have stepped into more publicly claiming that I am bisexual. I have always been interested in women and attracted to women and have had romantic instances with women, although I've never seriously dated, and I'm sure that's due to a bunch of other social conditioning. But I thought because I had never dated women or had a coming out story, or I've never had to deal with public scrutiny because I've never been publicly a part of the LGBTQ community, that then I couldn't really claim being a part of it. I was hesitant to identify with that label because I didn't think I had all the quintessential qualities of what I thought somebody who's attracted to women should have. Then I wasn't bisexual. Or I thought because I'm in a relationship with a man now, then what does it matter that I'm interested in women if I'm choosing to be with a man? A phrase you always hear about, but I don't think it actually really clicked for me until recently, is that sexuality is a spectrum. By definition, bisexuality is somebody who is attracted to male and female, and that has always resonated with me. It's just kind of been a thing with close friends that I've talked to, and nobody has ever called me bisexual, even though I've talked about being with women or like being interested in women, because that's always just kind of been a heaven thing. There are many ways that people express and explore their sexuality. A way that I've become more comfortable with my identity is by following other queer people. For example, Tess Holliday, who is a model who identifies as queer but is married to a man. Also, Akana, who has done some podcasts and videos about her bisexuality.
I used to think that bisexuality or homosexuality was like a pie chart, and you either had to be the entire pie chart or a straight half and half. If you're attracted to both sexes, you're bisexual. It doesn't matter what your percentages are. It doesn't matter if you've been with a girl. If you like both, you like both. I've only liked maybe a handful of girls in my entire life, and I'm mostly attracted to men. Like, I'm not actually bisexual, because if I am, I have to be, half women, half men. It's cut and dry, it's black and white. And now we know that's not true. And it's also, sexuality is incredibly fluid.
And I also watched this kind of cheesy show called The Bold Type on Hulu, and there's a character, Kat, who doesn't think that she's into girls, and then she ends up dating a girl, and then they break up, and she ends up seeing a guy, and then she's like, oh, I'm bisexual, but the lesbians in her life don't accept her as bisexual because bisexuality is always kind of seen as like a stepping stone to just being fully lesbian. And there's a lot of different perceptions, I think, of being bisexual, and that has made me kind of hesitant to step into that, but I am now. I was having a conversation with my younger sister, who is almost 16, who is also half white and half Filipino, and she was half-heartedly saying that she's not Filipino because she doesn't feel connected enough to her Filipino culture, although she wishes she was. And there's a lot to unpack in that itself. So I'm listening to her, and I end up telling her, you are Filipino by blood. You're growing up in the house with Lola, you are surrounded by our Filipino family, and maybe it'll take some more learning about the culture before you feel more comfortable with identifying with it, but you are. And then I just had this like connection moment. I was like, that's exactly how I feel about being bisexual. I think we all experience at some point of our journeys of not feeling like we're enough. Am I enough in order to claim that I'm this? Am I enough to belong in this group? Am I doing enough? I think these are healthy questions for us to ask and necessary in order for us to feel more secure in who we are and more secure in our actions. And we have to be careful that we're not doing it in a manner that we end up gaslighting ourselves. I think for both discovering yourself and for being an ally, it is pivotal to do your research both internally and reflectively and externally by consuming other resources. Expose yourself to voices in these communities and listen, like actually listen and take in what other people have to say. And then do our best to create and hold space for each other. I know that work can be so tough and so uncomfortable, and we will inevitably make mistakes along the way, but caring for and respecting each other and caring for and respecting ourselves in every which way that we come is really the only way that we're gonna get through it and make the world a better place. Thank you so much for listening. I would love to listen to you too. So if you wanna leave a comment or send me a message, I would love to see what you say. Peace.